Welcome to Inside JMS, the stories behind the people who work at the Hank Greenspun School of Journalism and Media Studies. I'm Kevin Stoker. I'm the director of the school. I'm here with my co-host, Dave Nourse.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
We are happy to have with us today Matt Eichner, Dr. Matt Eichner, who joined us last January. Matt, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Kevin.
Matt, as we were talking about, it's not easy doing a journalism career. You know, you work at small papers, move to next size paper and everything else. And then to decide to leave the business, kind of, because you did pick up the business again in Oregon, and go back to school and get a PhD at Oregon. Tell me what inspired that for you to take 4 kids, and have 4 kids, you and your wife have 4 kids, move from Idaho to Oregon to get a PhD.
Yeah, well, I was beginning to teach adjunct at the local university there in Rexburg, which is BYU, Idaho. And I was teaching a couple of classes adjunct. I was teaching a writing class, and I was teaching some photojournalism, but then started teaching the writing class. And I found that I really liked it. And I had gotten a master's. It was in communication and leadership from Gonzaga University while I was working as the managing editor of the newspaper there. And so I got the master's degree, and I started teaching classes, and I really liked it. And I said, I would like to do this full-time professionally. And so I started looking around for a few jobs, but I didn't really get anything. I had a master's. I had experience in a master's, but it wasn't enough to get me what I wanted. And I said, I need to get PhD if I want to teach at the collegiate level. And so I applied to a few different places, and I was accepted in a couple of different places, and I chose Oregon for a couple of reasons. One, I viewed it as probably the best chance for me to be successful in my career. But 2, my dad also had a place out there on the Oregon coast in Yachats. And so one of the nice things was being able to go and see them once a month. And we'd drive out to the coast, we'd pack up the family into the Suburban and drive them out to the coast, and we had a great time. And that was one of the real joys of being in Oregon, was being able to see him. When we'd spent a little bit of time around him when I was at a newspaper in Montana, but this was a great time to spend time with him.
Well, tell us where you grew up. You grew up in Montana, right?
I did. I grew up in Montana, and grew up in Great Falls, Montana. And after high school, I started a collegiate career down in California. I went down to the Bay Area, Hayward, California, and Chabot College. And
What? Now wait.
Yeah,
Montana to California.
Well, my mom lived in California, so I was living with my dad in Montana, and my mom lived in California. And I said I kind of wanted a little bit of a change, so I went down to California and.
It's a bit of a change, man.
It was a little bit of a change, and I really enjoyed my time there at Chabot College. It was great, and was able to take some classes, and I worked as a security guard in downtown Oakland. Skinny little 160-pound, 19-year-old working security downtown Oakland, California.
Bet you had a couple of stories from that.
Well, you know, the funny thing was it was so quiet. I worked the night shift, or sometimes the evening shift, but more often than not, the night shift. And just being able to be downtown and is like, 11 to 7. And I had a lot of time to think, kind of wander around, and I did my rounds, and not a lot happened. It was a quieter time back there, early 90s. And it was Oakland City Hall had been damaged in the Loma Prieta earthquake. And so one of the buildings that I was responsible for was the replacement City Hall for the city of Oakland, which was there at the city center development. And so doing security in that, and I enjoyed it. I was saving some money because I wanted to I went on a church mission after that. And after came back from Texas, I went back up to Montana State, because my friends, I had a couple of friends there at Montana State. And so ended up with an English degree, and then moved back down to California. My first professional job was writing market studies and appraisals in San Francisco, California for an accounting firm. And that lasted for about a year, and I got kind of bored of that kind of writing, and I said I want to do something fun, which was journalism. And so I actually got on at the Utah State journalism program. I wanted to start in journalism, and I was en route to a second bachelor's when life called, and we ended up moving up near my wife's hometown in Idaho, and I started working for the small newspaper there in sports, and quickly became the sports editor. And moved on to another newspaper, the Great Falls Tribune. I worked there. It's a Gannett paper, and worked on site there before they disbanded all of their newsrooms and centralized everything, and basically is a shell of what it used to be. And after working there for 3 years, I moved back down to Idaho and became the managing editor of a newspaper, the Rexburg Standard Journal. And I worked as managing editor for a few years. Went to the Idaho Falls Post-Register as their in their ad department, actually, as their special sections editor. And so at that time, though, I had started doing the adjunct work. And so that's what led me into academia, is my roundabout journalism career, working in a lot of different things, doing sports, doing news, writing a lot, producing some multimedia. And then, being boss of the shop for a little while has given me a lot of insight into, how the business works, and trying to build like principles of content to help gain and retain audiences. And that's been one of my focuses as I've been in academia, like translating some of my experiences, but also now linking it to some of the theory that I learned when I was at the University of Oregon, a little bit at Gonzaga, but mostly at the University of Oregon, thinking about why content is made, if there are effects, but then also the cultural aspects of society as well. So I felt like really grounded in some of the theory when it comes to communication and mass media theory. And so that led me to Oregon, and ended up in my first assistant professor job at Texas A&M University Corpus Christi. I was there for nearly 5 years, and now I'm here. It's been a kind of a long and winding road. I'm sure that's like, short answer long, yeah.
It's a podcast. Don't worry.
That's right. I can elaborate a little. It's fine.
We're trying to give Joe Rogan a run for his money over here. So
we're going to be here another 2.5 hours, I'm sure.
So, Matt, so many parts of your story are interesting. I want to just kind of dial into the moment that or maybe it's not a moment, but you're in that first job after school, right? Yeah. After your undergraduate experience, and it's not really pushing your buttons, and you're thinking, journalism is the kind of writing that I want to do, which means you're a storyteller, really, at heart. You're a storyteller. How did you get to that realization? I mean, you probably had a decent job, I would imagine, but it wasn't necessarily fulfilling. So what was missing, and how did the kind of journalism angle start to fulfill or scratch the itch that hadn't been scratched yet?
Yeah, I think that's a great word, fulfilling, because it wasn't. I mean, I enjoyed my time there. I really did. I mean, great folks, and I still have some fond memories. There was I think, yes, there was the fulfilling aspect of it, but I wanted more exciting writing. I was doing similar things. We would go out to a site, we would look at the site and then just basically create a document based on the appraiser's, methodology. And I mean, it's boring. And so, yes, the journalism aspect of it is a lot more fun. Also, I wanted to go to sports events for free and get paid to go there, which I was able to accomplish because covering sports allows me to do that. Eventually it becomes work. That's right. But the appeal of being able to attend sporting events for free from kind of a privileged location, in a lot of ways, that kind of drove me into sports and sports journalism. Journalism overall, yes, but sports in particular, and that was my first job in journalism, was doing sports.
Awesome.
So how did you, gravitate from sports to news to management? And then I'm not sure, what did you cover up in Oregon?
Yeah, well, so I wanted to be in charge. I had some ideas about what it would take to be successful. and spending 3 years at a larger newspaper, a daily, getting some insights there. There was some great work that was being done at the time there at the Great Falls Tribune, and it was my hometown paper. I grew up in Great Falls, and it was really interesting covering sports in my hometown and sort of seeing how the larger newspapers do it. And so when I went back to Idaho to be the managing editor, I wasn't the managing editor quite at first, but I went back there with an understanding that the managing editor at the time, he was leaving. And I wanted an in. And I had ambitions. I wanted to, being a sports editor at a small newspaper is fine, but I wanted to do more. And so as I got further training in, I was able to cover stories in the community that were an education beat. I never did cops and courts beat or anything like that, but education, healthcare, some of the elections, things like that. Able to cover journalism and stories more in depth in the community than just sports. I liked it. It's not as exciting as sports, but it has maybe more impact on people, especially in terms of taxes and things. So when it came to being in charge of the newspaper, one, I didn't feel like that newspaper the smaller newspaper I didn't like its design. Having been a paginator for the past 4 years leading up to that, I wanted to design a paper kind of my own way. And so when I took over, I became its lead designer, designed most of the front pages, set forth a style guide for the rest of the newspaper, and, led a redesign on that. Actually, at least one really good redesign, which I still really like. And other principles, were brought forth later.
Do they still
in the
use
career.
that redesign?
I do not know, to be honest. No, I don't think so. I mean, this is 15 years ago or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, 16 years ago now. So, I mean, it's 2008. But being able to deal with a P&L, profit and loss statement, dealing with the budget, dealing with hiring, firing, gave me a lot of insight into the business of the organization, just being able to run the shop. And, to have a hand in all these things, plus launch our fledgling social media efforts and kind of set standards for those as well. So, as I came in to being a managing editor, it became less of, here, put out this paper 3 times a week, and more, put out the paper 3 times a week and do social media and populate the website. And so things started to branch out from there. It wasn't that long after that video became introduced, and so we started doing more in that. And so as I worked in the industry, it changed due to the technological aspects of it. But I felt like the content principles needed to remain the same in a lot of ways. Telling stories in the community, finding stories that other places wouldn't find, trying to bring out stories that weren't being heard. And, a lot of these things I still kind of try to have in the classroom as well.
Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about that shift from working professionally in the field as a manager, where certainly mentoring young reporters is part of your job. But then you got that first adjunct position and you realized you had a knack for teaching. Maybe tell us a little bit about what that transition was like. Not necessarily the transition to teaching full-time, but what was it about teaching that really satisfied you and led you to, it's not everybody that's like, you know what, I'm going to move my family across the country to Oregon so I can go back to school at, not 20 years of age.
Well, trust me, my wife had similar questions, but we had actually talked about it before and realized that there would be a time when I would be full-time. We had kind of both had the same thought, really back when we were in Montana, that this would be something that eventually I would go into. It just was a matter of when. So yes, working in the industry versus teaching in the classroom, I could spend a lot more time mentoring on the little details that would turn a fledgling writer into somebody who's confident in producing work that could be published. And so one of my things that I say at the beginning of the beginning of a semester would be that after spending like 3 months with me, hopefully you are producing work that I would be happy to print. And that has been kind of a philosophy that's driven me in a lot of ways, because I want to make sure that the time we spend together is spent putting together like almost like a conglomeration of principles and practices to be able to produce professional quality work. And when I was at the newspaper, I could give some of that guidance. I would say, write this story, and then they'd give me a story, they'd file it, and then I'd have to mark the heck out of it. And because some of my writers didn't always have the best training going into, we would hire them, not necessarily having a ton of training, because being experienced wasn't my number one quality that I was looking for. My number one quality as a managing editor was curiosity. Second would be hard work ethic, because you're not getting paid a ton, but you're expected to write a lot. So, yeah. But yeah, I mean, being able to spend time with students going over principles and practicing those in class. I like to do a lot of in-class exercises. So what I like to do is I like to say, okay, well, here is like a type of story or a principle in this type of story. Like my writing classes right now, we're in feature stories. So we spend a lot of time going over leads and anecdotal leads, what I call anecdotal leads, where we start out with like a story that maybe encapsulates the larger story, that condenses somebody's experience into something that's typical. We spend a lot of time doing that. We've got exercises now where we're like, can you set the scene? Can you take me there? Can you write about something that's happening in a cogent way? And if you can do that, and I just told my students that this morning, I said, if you start with a nice story at the beginning that encapsulates somebody's life, it will make me very happy as a grader, and I will be in a much happier mood as I grade your story, which probably will result in a better grade for you. So I'm looking for an anecdote at the beginning of your story. Really, it's not necessarily required, but it is. So, I mean, it's part of the rubric that you have to have like an anecdotal lead, but it doesn't always happen. So I spend a lot of time like, let's work on this. Let's practice this. Let's take a look at a scene, and can we put this into writing? Okay, now here's an exercise. Choose from one of these 3 videos and write for me a description of something that was happening in that to the main character in this video.
So it seems like you've always had this element of your personality, which has been educational, right? Whether you're mentoring young reporters or now in the classroom, obviously you have the chance to mentor a lot of, hopefully one day, reporters. As you've developed your teaching style and your teaching philosophy, what do you think what is Matt Eichner like as a professor or as a teacher or as a mentor? What can one expect when they walk in your class? Already we found out that anecdotal lead, at least in the writing classes.
Right.
But I mean, let's talk a little bit more philosophy-wise. Like, what's your philosophy like in the classroom?
Well, my philosophy has always been that the end goal should be professional level writing. So whatever I can do to help facilitate that. I've always viewed myself as more of a facilitator. I believe that with enough practice and training, we can take somebody who is used to writing in this English style of, we get them all. They've been told since their youth, 5 paragraphs, an introduction, 3 supporting points, and then a conclusion. And I say, forget all that, and the sooner you forget all that, the better, because we don't conclude at the end. We write a summary lead at the beginning. So for news, we give away the ending first, and then you start to build the evidence after that in descending order of importance. We call that inverted pyramid. Okay, so I'm telling a lot of, there's some who have experience, but in the beginning classes, like, the 207 classes, a lot don't. And so I spend a lot of time trying to train them out of writing this style that they've done ever since high school. Like, you don't need APA-style citations for that. You just have to say, according to this. And if you give me a link, that's great, too. So, I mean, it's But my philosophy is that if we have a goal in mind, I start with, here's what it looks like in the professional world. We use a lot of examples. Las Vegas, the Review Journal, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Pulitzer Prizes even. I say this is like the top writing. This is professional level writing. What can we do to get there? Well, let's talk about the principles of this. Now let's practice these. And after enough practice, let's start to do it. We start kind of small. Write me a lead. Okay. All right. Now I'm going to give you feedback on that. Let's learn how to do quote style. Let's learn how to, now we're building a story. So we start small. We build to a news brief, 100 to 200 words, inverted pyramid from a press release. Now we're going to add quotes and call it a short story. Now we're going to add even more quotes and details and call it a preview, and you got to go out and cover something in the community or on campus. Now we're going to write and for this semester, we're doing election coverage. So now this week, they've signed up for individual beats to cover in the election, and they have to write a preview for the election that's coming up. And they've divided it up by individual races. So somebody has like the local aspect of the presidential race. Somebody's covering the Sam Brown, Jackie Rosen race. Somebody else is covering the assemblies. Somebody else is covering the mayoral race. Somebody's covering like Nye County races, which I lumped into one beat. So they got 10 different beats. Now, can you sum up for me what's important in this? Who's running? Reach out to the candidates or their PR people. What do they have to say? They're doing all that, and they're bringing it back to me, and they're like, so what do we do? Like, I can't get anybody to respond. Okay, well, what should we do? And we have these discussions in classes. So by the time we get to the end of the semester, my hope is, well, they've produced professional level work that anybody would be happy to print, maybe with a couple of tweaks or two, but yeah, I mean, that's what I want. So that's my philosophy.
It's a great philosophy.
So, Matt, you had your career has kind of gone through multiple transitions, but then again, journalism has gone through multiple transitions during the part of your professional career and now into your collegiate work. Tell me about those transitions. First, you helped develop the website for the Standard Journal, and then you moved on, and then we moved to other, changing of philosophies, not just a dumping, the copy for the print edition and onto the website, but having its own, your own reporters, releasing stories as soon as they, the reporter could get them done. Two, also bringing in video. This may not be your first podcast. So all these things. Tell me about that, kind of going through all those transitions and how it's kind of led to the way you teach journalism today.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. The mediums have expanded quite a bit. Therefore, we need to have at least some sort of proficiency. So when I teach like the multimedia storytelling class, it's like, well, let's run you through print. So we're working in InDesign, but we're also producing video, producing audio. Can you take pictures? Things like that. How many different ways can we tell a story? I will tell you this. I believe, though, that the quality of storytelling shouldn't change from medium to medium. I think that we're still trying to tell the story. Now, if I'm teaching the photojournalism class, well, there's been advancements in technology from DSLR to mirrorless. And when I first started taking pictures for the newspaper in 2006, that was my first introduction to a DSLR. A 1 megapixel Panasonic that shot 4 consecutive photos and then had to process them for about a minute. And now we've got amazing mirrorless cameras with amazing video qualities. And I say, well, what is the story that we're trying to tell? Okay. Who is out there that has a story that we can tell? We can capture that in video. We can capture that through still photography. I can write about it. I can take audio, sample their audio, and perhaps interview them remotely, bring it all back, compile it into an audio story that we hear on NPR or something like that. But in the end, the storytelling aspect of it has to have a level of integrity, because the nature of journalism, there's been technological changes, but in the industry, what we've seen is a steady decline of trust in journalism. And when I was with the Standard Journal as the managing editor, we grew our audience. And I believe we grew our audience because we reported with integrity, but we were connected to the community. And so at that time, I became a big believer in how the story is told, not just like technical proficiency. And yes, good writing helps. But the journalist needs to do a few things. And this is what I used to tell journalists this at the end of my classes, but in this semester I decided to say it at the beginning. Because journalists have a difficult time sometimes having audiences believe them. Are there situations in which people are believed? And this is something that I learned that forms sort of theoretically in graduate school at Oregon when Dr. Seth Lewis had me teach certain aspects of his one of his classes. And he had some writing that had been done by Alan Jacobs, who teaches, I believe, at TCU. And he wrote about there are specific times when people might change their minds. And he gave an example of the Yale Political Union. And he said there are some times when they will, quote, be broken on the floor. So the Yale Political Union is a debate society. Debate, two sides of an issue. But sometimes somebody will change their mind in the middle of the debate. And I said, how is that possible? It's a combination of a couple of factors. But often what it boils down to is, yes, facts. Okay, fine. Facts don't often change people's minds, however. But what can change somebody's mind is the attitude that the journalist has and that the person towards the journalist has. So there has to be some kind of relationship there. The key was that they found that when somebody changed their mind, they knew that the person that they were debating had their best interest at heart. They knew that they weren't a bad person. They weren't the enemy. They weren't out to get them. But they had a relationship with them and knew that really they weren't a bad person, that they had their best interest at heart. And I said, well, how is that accomplished? And I believe it's two ways. One is, they're both on the journalist. One is, I believe, sort of a humility in truth-telling. We're filled with drop-the-mic moments, X posts that, are meant to be truth bombs or whatever. They rarely change minds. But I think a more transparent approach to journalism, a more, here I am, I'm willing to respond if I make mistakes, and I will make mistakes, that I correct them quickly and acknowledge them. I mean, this isn't new. I mean, it's like, Kovacs and Rosenstiel, 10 elements of journalism stuff, but rarely seen in practice, I believe. And the way to find that a journalist is an actual person is through community involvement, especially if you're at a smaller news organization. So if you're in a community news organization, one of the things that we did was we get out in the community. I was a member of one of the local clubs, whatever, it was Kiwanis. We met every Tuesday or Wednesday for lunch. A lot of local businessmen. Well, I had a lot of conversations, a lot of relationships. Okay, I knew them, they knew me, they knew what I was about. I say, you know, if you're a reporter or an editor, get out in the community. Now, if you work for a national news organization, how can people access you? Well, you can take them behind the scenes, videos. Here's who I am. You know, there's several who do this, you know, because they're maybe unabashed about their support of a sports team or something like that. It provides a way in. You know, so it's about being accessible. Understanding that you will make mistakes, and it's fine. We just correct them. We acknowledge them. We move on. And then having a relationship with the audience and letting the audience know, I'm not out to get you. I'm just here's what I saw. Here's what my source said, and I'm going to name my source, and I'm going to say here's how I got the quote, and here's how I know this, and this is what they're saying. Now, if there's more out there, sure, fine. I'll do another story. I don't have a problem with it because I don't have like an agenda to grind or an axe to grind, an agenda to fulfill. I just simply want to report what's happening. And building that relationship is, there's probably more ways to maybe create trust among media, but that's the one I preach among my students. I don't know. I tell them be humble, be truthful, acknowledge your mistakes. Be accessible.
Yeah, build those relationships.
Yeah.
So I want to just take a minute. So we've heard a lot about Matt's professional journey and his educational journey. Maybe tell us a little bit about what you're like when you're not in the classroom or you're not working, Matt. I mean,
family.
Talk to us a little bit.
All right, well,
what do you do for fun? How do you spend your time?
What do I do for? I come here for fun. This is my fun.
The podcast.
Kidding. Yes, podcasting. It's my life. So I've been married to my lovely wife, Shalina. We've been married since 2001 when we began the Eichner Odyssey, as I like to say, 2001, an Eichner Odyssey. Yes, I'm old. Thank you. I'm a little older, for, starting out second career, I suppose. But I enjoy having, I enjoy spending time with my family, playing games. I've got 4 kids. I've got my 3 girls. Megan is 22, and my youngest, Sierra, she's 11. No, 12 now? No, 11.
Come on, Dad.
She's 11. See, you put me on the spot. I make all kinds of mistakes. She'll be 12 next year. And my 16-year-old daughter, who will be 17 in December, and my son, Jace, who is 15 now. Yeah, so he'll be 16 next year. And we moved out to a town outside of town, Pahrump. We wanted to live in a country town, mostly because my wife hates Vegas. So I said, you know what? I don't want to live in Vegas either. I want to live out in the country. So we're out of town. We enjoy working in the yard. We're turning the desert into a green landscape. Hopefully the kind of landscape where we can entertain guests sometime. We just got some grass seed in. We'll see how it goes. But the nice thing about being in Pahrump is we're on a well. We don't have the water restrictions that Vegas does, so it's kind of nice. I really enjoy watching sports. I greatly enjoyed watching the Ducks beat Ohio State this weekend. That was fantastic. Sometimes I go maybe I've had to temper that over the years. My wife has helped me temper my sports loving side of me. Mm-hmm. So I enjoy watching and playing sports quite a bit. I enjoy eating. I love good food. I love cooking food. I love barbecue. One of the great things about moving to Texas was I learned about Texas barbecue. I am looking forward to making my first brisket out here in Nevada sometime. And there's a few of us here in the department who are Texas barbecue lovers. I know Ben Burrows and Ashton, they both are, they've showed off some of their barbecue skills. So yeah, it's something that also an attractor here, having like-minded folks. So I love being outdoors. I love that we're back in the mountains because I've got Charleston Peak looming over Pahrump. I love hiking We take the family hiking at least once a month up in the Spring Mountains if we can.
Yeah, and you have to go through the pass, the Potosi Pass.
Yeah, I
in
got
order
to go
get
through the pass there. I haven't had a January yet. I understand it can get a little snowy and icy. It's fine. I got the 4-wheel drive.
Listen, you grew up in Montana. I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, you'll be fine.
Oh, all the drivers out there, if there's any of you listening, all you have to do is just slow down. Okay? If you just slow down, it'll be fine. Seriously.
So Matt, if there was a question we should have asked you that we haven't asked you, what would it be?
Professionally speaking about the job, it's a little more difficult than I thought it would be, maybe. Being a professor isn't like super easy. There's a lot that goes into it. And I had a real crash course in Texas, and I feel like I'm better at it now, which is nice. Better for you, Kevin, since you're my boss, and you can benefit from I've learned from some of the mistakes that I've made in the past. And so
I think that's true for all of us.
Yeah, it's a journey. For me, it's always been a journey. This is a great adventure. Learning things, learning new things, implementing new things. There's always something new to learn. There's always something more I could do. And so I've felt already very connected to the area. I've already felt very connected to UNLV. And I am super excited to be here. I mean, it's my second semester. I joined up full-time in January, and I have just loved it here. I mean, the facilities are fantastic, but more than that, it's everybody in the department. One of the things that, Kevin, you talked about when I was being hired was sort of bridging the gap between upstairs and downstairs. Downstairs is a lot of technical skills, and upstairs is a lot of theory. And I feel like I'm a nice blend of both. And one of the things that I really appreciate about being with Dr. Ben Burrows is he's given me a few opportunities to contribute to research again. That was something that I felt like I didn't do very well at when I was in Texas, and starting to do more writing, starting to do a little bit more research, get off the ground with that has been exciting to me. And the one thing that's negative is a 3-hour commute. 3 hours are spent in the car, and I'm just like, man, I need to be more productive. So that's the only thing that I haven't, and that's the only negative is that 3-hour commute. Other than that, I've just absolutely loved it here. The opportunities the students have here at UNLV, the different types of storytelling, especially in sports. But I think an underrated aspect are all the other news stories that are out there. And we spend a lot of time, sports telling, sports storytelling. There's great avenues for that here, especially in a lot of video. There's a big emphasis here in this department. There's a lot of stories out there that aren't being told, and the students have a unique opportunity to tell those stories. And there are so many opportunities here in Las Vegas I never even thought were possible for students. And hopefully I can help facilitate some of that experience.
Well, thank you, Matt. We've really enjoyed talking to you. It's been terrific, and that was a great answer. That was a great answer to a question we really didn't ask a question.
Absolutely. Matt, what a pleasure. It was a pleasure to chatting, and I'll just say it's great having you on the faculty.
I agree.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed you both. I really like this talk, actually, this conversation. So thanks.